content raised in the step 3 complaint may be subject to an executive session, specifically under ORS 192.660(2B) for complaints about a public employee or employees. Well, we will first address in a public meeting the components of the step 3 appeal that are not complaints about a public employee. But if need be, we will then move into executive session under ORS 192.660(2B) when we discuss those public employee complaints. Following the executive session, we will return to a public meeting to vote on the appeal. I'm going to ask Mrs. Macon for you to take about 5 minutes to provide your comments tonight. And then following those comments, we'll take about 5 minutes for the board members to follow up with questions for you or for staff. So Mrs. Macon, would you like to begin?
Yes, thank you. Before I do that, I'm just wondering, there's a few people on the call that I don't recognize, and I'm always curious who's been invited to a special session. So outside of board members and a few key staff people, could somebody explain who the other folks are that are here?
Okay, so we have Terry Proctor, who is our kind of tech person that runs the audio and makes sure that we all can be heard. I'm just going to go up the list of people in the chat. Stephanie Stoden, our chief of staff. Sean Bird has some fancy title.
No, yeah.
Okay. Director Bailey, Roseanne Powell, who's our board manager. Sean, what's your title?
Chief of Schools.
Chief of Schools. See, I knew, yeah, something. I get you and Stephanie confused because I write COS and she's chief of staff, you're chief of schools. Right. You know, Director Moore, Director DePass, Mary Kane is with our legal team. Libra Ford is from SEI. Kara Bradshaw is part of our board management team. John Stellwagen is with our legal team. You know, Director Bim Edwards, Superintendent Guerrero. David Roy is head of comms. I'm assuming you know Danny Ledesma, who's our equity. Ben Kiefer, principal. You, and then Director Scott Constam and Lowry.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
All right, so I have very limited remarks, and I will just keep referring to Vernon as the Vernon administration, not anyone specifically by name, so we won't have to go to a separate session. I'm just going to say at the Vernon Elementary Black History Assembly of 2019, our daughter had her first racist experience. She learned at a structured school event that white kids play instruments and black kids play buckets. The question is to the board members, what are you going to do about this? PPS has already defined bucket playing as not part of Black history. I appreciate that, and that it will not appear in future events or programming for Black History Month. That's been documented. Thank you to PPS for that. It violates all the elements of the racial equity policy of PPS. So therefore, what are the board members voting on? You cannot vote to say you agree this was not a civil rights offense, because this is not a federal courtroom, right? What we're voting on in Oregon law says board members are to vote if this falls within or if it violates PPS policies. So what are you going to do? Now that we know that a Vernon-style Black History Assembly is a violation of the racial equity policies, we're demanding that you ensure students have a, quote, high quality and culturally relevant, end quote, Black History Assembly. We're demanding that you write clear and simple policy that PPS K-5 schools use the Lee Elementary model for Black History Month curriculum and programming. We're also demanding you remove the name of the racist superintendent from the district offices and rename it for Frederick Douglass. That concludes my comments. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mrs. Macon. Board members, do you have any, or sorry, staff, do we have any staff response at this time? All right, board members, do you have any questions for Mrs. Macon?
No.
I might, but not right now.
All right, any other questions for Mrs. Macon? Well, seeing no questions and no need to move into executive session, the board will now vote on resolution 6152, which is the resolution to uphold the superintendent's decision on a step 3 appeal for complaint 2020-08.
are you just putting the resolution on the table, or are we actually voting right now? Because I have some questions for staff.
So if you have questions for staff, let's go ahead and do those now, and then I will make the motion to bring the vote forward.
Okay. So I'm just wondering if this is a question for Mary Kane, because the district response is predicated on a outside counsel's recommendation or advice, and I'm wondering who that outside counsel was, and if you could just summarize for those of us who aren't lawyers.
The outside counsel was Randy Geller from Harang Long, who assisted us in this response. And I'm going to hand it over to John, who I think was better prepared to discuss that this evening. But first, you have to get off mute, John.
Okay, that's fine. So the first part of your question, Julia, was who the outside counsel was. Is that correct?
Right.
And I think Mary identified that. And then the second part was?
Just to summarize, because when I read this I read it initially, although I have a follow-up question, as primarily a response to a complaint that we had violated both statutes and the Constitution. So I'm not a lawyer, so I'm just wanted to get since if our response is relying on outside counsel, just a short summary from our internal team of our main response of why it wasn't.
Sure. So the two constitutional issues that would arise are actually addressed not necessarily through the Constitution, but through Title VI and Title 34, which make it unlawful to discriminate in the context of providing programs, specifically educational programs that require where the recipients are recipients of federal financial assistance, which PPS obviously is. And through that analysis, outside counsel, I think, did a thorough analysis looking at the statutory language and the framework around those issues, and determined that there was no violation of either Title VI or Title 34, because while it may be concerning the way the assembly was set up and the disparities that may or may not exist there, simply watching a performance of that nature and seeing issues that Ms. Macon raises as concern do not necessarily rise to the level of an actual violation of either of those statutory provisions or the U.S. Constitution. And so that, I guess, in a quick summary, is what legal counsel provided. I would concur with that summary and that determination provided by Mr. Geller and Harang Long. I think it was also Sharon Rudnick at Harang Long who assisted in that assessment. And so that was the view through the legal lens, I suppose, that was determined at that time by Harang Long. So does that fully address?
It does answer my question, and I guess I had a follow-up with Ms. Macon, because in your comments tonight, the complaint that I'm looking at from December 7th is titled Legal Violations. But I think what you said at the beginning of your comments is that you're actually now saying that you want the board to be voting on whether it's a violation of our policy versus the finding of a legal violation.
That's correct. We did raise it as a civil rights, and then through the process of the step responses and our appeals, we also raised and identified PPS racial equity policy, and Sean Bird mentioned those as well in his summary here, that we feel that it's clearly a violation of the PPS racial equity policy, and that in fact is what the PPS board is tasked with upholding, is the PPS policies.
Yeah. Julia, maybe I can chime in on that piece. I do think it initially started as a question of a legal violation, and then there became, in the second step, more a question of whether it was a policy violation. And that's, I think, is, as Ms. Macon addressed, that was addressed by both Sean Bird, and I think Danny probably can address that racial equity lens as well, if the board has specific questions to those policies and whether there's violations that are there. Like, I think that was addressed again in conjunction with legal counsel through Sean Bird's response, though.
Right. And so just so that I understand, if we get a complaint that something's a violation of the law or the Constitution, are you saying that in our complaint process, that's not something the board would vote on?
No, I'm not saying that.
Okay. You're just saying it shifted to a question about the policy from, okay.
Yeah, exactly. That's the Macon's complaint, I think, evolved or expanded to address other issues when they received the response that outside counsel had assessed that there was not a legal violation. They looked at policy as well and said, well, what about, basically we also, as Ms. Macon just addressed, have a belief that there was a policy violation as well. And we then address that in the next step.
I don't know, Ms. Ledesma, do you want to speak to the policy or?
Sure. It's my opinion that the programming offered at Vernon is not in violation of the equity policy, but rather that the programming is in affirmation of the policy.
Great.
Can I speak to that just for a moment?
I think that you are on record with your opinion about that, Mrs. Macon, and that is the substance of your complaint. And I think the crux of the matter is that difference of opinion. So I think you've been heard on that at this stage. Are there any other questions for staff, Julia, or Director Brim-Edwards?
Yeah, so I think maybe the only other thing I would say is an observation, and it sounds like this has been remedied by the school, but the actual participation numbers that were in the response differed somewhat from the makeup of the participants in the assembly. And my understanding is part of that was because the assembly was after hours, that not all students participated. And it sounded like the school has acknowledged that. So there is a variance between what we're saying is the demographic data, which is fairly representative in the choir and the band. I don't know if Principal Kiefer wants to comment on that or.
Yeah, I'm happy to clarify. So two things: the evening event was not, and Ms. Macon can clarify this for us. When she said my daughter was subject to an assembly, the assembly was the daytime event. The evening performance, which the pictures were generated for the purpose of this complaint, at least the ones that I saw that you had, that was the one that had what looked like the differential representation as compared to the numbers that you're looking at. And we did specifically move to within the day for a lot of the performances because we were not having the same rates of participation for our students in the evening piece in the jazz band as in the during the day performance, because obviously we have all of our kids there at school. So that was something that the music teacher had done intentionally to try and make sure that all the students who were in jazz band had a chance to perform as a part of jazz band, specific to that part of it, Julia.
Great, thank you. And I just had one last question. And this is primarily for the record that we, I'm sorry, I can't find it right now. We say at some point that we're addressing, well, this is was initially a legal response to a legal complaint that we're addressing sorry, I can't find the exact wording here. We're addressing the issues that many, but not all of the issues that have been raised. And I'm wondering just the person who's on point for that work.
I appreciate that question because I was offered an invitation from Dr. Bird on June 16th. I replied on June 17th. I'd be happy to meet with him. I reached out again on July 1st, and I'm still awaiting a response.
So yes, I'm happy to meet with you, Mrs. Macon. So we are working with the principal and the area senior director over the school, and as well as the regional superintendent to address some of the other issues that were brought up, particularly the achievement issues, the student achievement issues. So we are and can talk more about some of the issues in terms of participation and how the students are, how the activities are selected for the after school program. But yes, we are addressing the other issues that were brought up that are not part of this complaint, but other issues that have been raised by the Macons. So Ben, do you want to talk about the after school programming?
Yeah, in specifically around participation, there's been a number of different things in terms of a normal process that SEI goes through in evaluating SUN programming, but also we've done some really targeted outreach, and it definitely has not gotten to, around Battle of the Books or Test for Success to the levels that we want, but we've been working with teachers to specifically reach out to students that are from underserved populations and also students of color directly around trying to just increase overall levels of participation in the activities where we don't have representative participation. The other piece that we've been working on is trying to work with actual students to try and come up with the things that they're interested in to try and, have different offerings and different things that are important and relevant to them. And that's a part, and I'm sure Libra could speak to this, but that's also a part of what they do as a normal process to try and reach out to families. SEI works closely with our families of color and specifically our Black families to try and hear them and let their voices be heard in terms of what is valuable and important to them. And we try and reflect that in the programming. For the chess club, though, specifically in the Battle of Books, we recognize a gap between our schools population, the representative population, and where we're at, and are committed to continuing to try and reach out to try and make those activities more interesting and engaging to students of color through a number of different ways in terms of reaching out to teachers and also trying to increase participation of adults of color in those programs to try and help see if that helps recruitment.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Director Brim-Edwards, do you have anything further?
No, that's all I have.
Mrs. Macon, would you like a chance to address the things you've heard or respond to Mrs. Ledesma's comments now at this time?
Thank you so much, and I'll try to keep it brief. In response to Ms. Ledesma's comment that everything seems to be upholding the policy at Vernon, I am confused because we have the document from, I believe it's Stephanie Snowden, saying that it's acknowledged that the bucket drumming will not be taking place in the Black History program in the future. Those two things to me don't seem to go together. In response to Mr. Kiefer's comments about the attempts or efforts to get the programs to have more participation by Black and Latinx students, in the second year we're looking at this, the percentage rates got worse by about 10% in some of these after-school programs. So I think it's not, obviously that's just one piece of what's happening at the school. There's a major systemic problem that's not being addressed. We're just able to point at some of these issues, but there's something very seriously amiss there. Thank you.
And Mrs. Macon, my question is, what do you envision it looking like if the serious issue that you're referring to was able to be addressed?
Well, we can see the outcomes, right? We can see test scores and we can see student participation and the students not feeling like they are somehow being encouraged to participate in some programs and not the others, or don't see themselves represented in some programs and not in others. And the outcome would be Black kids are represented in all programs and Black student test scores are equal or better than what other students are doing because the Black students are brilliant.
Are there any other comments before we move to consider this resolution?
Director Lowry, I might be able to add one more piece in response to Julia's question, I guess, and it's specific to the policy question that Ms. Macon raises. Just noting the nature of the racial educational equity policy, which is obviously an attempt by the board to set a framework around addressing disparity throughout the district and setting goals and a framework and markers to achieve those. While there may be a concern that the Macons have appropriately raised about concerns they have, it doesn't necessarily rise to the level of a policy violation, simply because there is an event that they feel demonstrates ongoing disparity, that while there's a policy in place that sets a framework and sets goals to achieve, that's different than a policy violation. And I just note that that's the framework that the board would be reviewing in making a determination about whether there was actually a policy violation here related to this event. And I guess that's all I have, unless the board has additional questions.
Anything further? All right, the board will now vote on resolution number 6152, resolution to uphold the superintendent's decision on a step 3 appeal. Complaint number.
Chair Lowry?
Yeah.
Sorry, this is Roseanne. I wanted to just say that the resolution is a little bit different. The way the resolution is written is that the board members will either uphold or overturn the superintendent's recommendations. So they will need to say which one they are choosing. Sorry to interrupt.
Do a vote by the roll.
Correct.
So, but I need a motion to put this on the table, and then each person will need to either uphold or overturn the superintendent. Great. All right, I'm gonna try this again.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I just have a question, like a parliamentary question. Can we do that?
Can we do what?
Have a motion in which we're answering on something other than yes or no. Isn't it? She just.
You can frame the question to uphold, and then just take a yay or nay vote.
So that's
Probably better.
that's what I recommend versus having like an answer other than yes or no, unless I don't know, Mary, if you.
I think if we frame it in a yes or no question, we'll be good.
Yeah, I think that would be cleaner as well.
So I think since this resolution was posted, I think we're probably going to have to put the resolution as written on the table, and then we would have to revise it and then vote on the revision and then vote on the underlying resolution, on the amended resolution.
Can't we just vote yes that we're upholding it? Or no, we're not upholding it?
There's not a substantive difference there, so John or Mary, I would defer to you, but I think you can just frame it that way.
What was posted?
Yeah, Roseanne, do you have the language exactly as it was posted?
Just give me a moment.
Okay, here's the resolution as it was posted. Board of Education blank, the superintendent's decision of the step 3 appeal is the final decision.
So I think the chair can just put forward the question. The Board of Education upholds the superintendent's decision, and then we take a vote.
Right, with the yes or no.
Great. So the board will now vote on resolution number 6152, resolution to uphold the superintendent's decision on the step 3 appeal, complaint number 2020-08. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Director Scott moves and who seconded? Is that Rita?
Second.
Yep.
Oh, Director DePass, Director Bailey, and Director Moore all seconds. I think it was Moore first that y'all got in there. All right, we're gonna go ahead and is there any further discussion on the resolution? All right, I'm gonna go alphabetical. Was that a, sorry, I'm flipping back between this screen and my script, so I can't always see when someone indicates.
No, Chair Lowry, I'm sorry, I almost didn't, but no, the only thing I'm going to say is I just wanted to say that I think there's broad agreement to Ms. Macon's final point she made about how we all would like to see increased diversity in the programming. And as a result, hopefully of that and other changes, increased test scores, particularly for children of color. So I appreciated that comment. I think there's broad agreement on that.
I would concur. All right, Director Bailey,
Yes.
Director Brim Edwards,
Yes.
Director DePass,
Yes.
Director Constam,
Yes.
Director Lowry, yes. Director Moore,
Yes.
Director Scott.
Yes.
And there are no abstentions. Okay, resolution 6152 is approved by a vote of 7-0. Thank you all for your time this evening. And we are now adjourned.